It's not very often we get to have the GOAT conversation and there not be much dispute. It is a very rare occasion. But on this edition of the Sports Cubicle with the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, and myself, Mike Mercado, we get to have that conversation about a very specific player, a very specific athlete, and that is Serena Williams, who announced earlier this week that she's evolving from the sport of professional tennis. This is somebody who's on any Mount Rushmore. This is somebody who's the greatest, and it's not even arguable on her side of the tennis court. Some may argue she's the best to ever hold a racket. That is not for us to decide, but it is, without a doubt, one of the greatest athletes of any sport, of any generation to play. And we had the honor to watch her. Paul, when you saw this news break and you saw that one of the greatest to ever do anything on this planet is finally hanging it up over the next few tournaments, we saw her actually get bounced in the first round. So we know that the sport is catching up to her. She is a mom, had complications with the birth of her child. She, a hero all in all. But when you heard this news, what did you think?
Well, it's just definitely it's sad to see a great player call it quits. I know it's been some time since she's won a Grand Slam, tournament, but she still performed well all the way through her career and up until recently. And, it's just anytime someone that's really, really good steps down, it makes you kind of think of their era and what they've accomplished and how you just don't get to see that often. Now, I know when it comes to tennis, we've been kind of spoiled overall, men's and women's, because, you talk about Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal, and Novak Djokovic, and then couple that with Serena Williams and what she did on her own on the women's side.
And Venus.
Makes you think of that. Well, and Venus too. I mean, but then where do we draw the line? Like Caroline Wozniacki and,
100%. It's 100%, Paul.
You don't just name everybody. It's really just the four that I named, like the three men and Serena.
Mm-hmm.
Really, just the four of them carried tennis the last quarter century.
100%. Now, let me ask you this, and I'm going to throw it to Devin in a second, but you brought up that interesting point of where the cutoff is. I think a lot of people, they hold one thing against Serena, if that's possible. But you know how sports media, you know how this dirty industry that we are does things. They give her a hard time because she never really had a rival because she wiped the floor with everybody in her prime. And a lot of people thought Venus was going to be her rival. But here's the thing, like, these are sisters. They don't have necessarily, they say matchups make fights. They don't have the best matchup to go against each other to make the most entertaining thing at the U.S. Open, at a Wimbledon. But do you think, and I'm going to throw to Devin in a second, but Paulie, do you think that did that have anything to do with maybe why we don't celebrate her even more the way we do Ali and Jordan or Tiger? Or do you think it's just, this is as much flowers as we were ever going to give her?
I think a lot of it is just there's not a lot of people that are into women's tennis or can appreciate when some of the names that, you mentioned, Ali amongst, some of the greats, men's sports and especially, a sport like boxing in its prime, people were really into that. I don't think a lot of people get into women's tennis. And, so from an outsider, the name because she's a celebrity and she's earned that right to be a celebrity in her industry and beyond. But I think it's that, the lack of popularity for women's tennis specifically and women's sports in general. But I mean, I think the fact that she's a Black woman, so I think automatically she's, got the fact that she's a female and people are just not into female sports and she's an African American and, they get a certain treatment in this country that's different from a white male. And I think when you put that in there, that's why she's not a household name to people that really should be treating her as a household name, because she is a household name. And despite the fact she didn't have great competition like, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic were all in the same era, she still had great tennis players that she played against. And you mentioned her sister, you think of it too, how she comes up, her sister's older than her by a couple of years. But I remember when Venus was supposed to be the next big thing, and Venus was a great tennis player in her own right, but she's not anything like Serena. And I think the fact that Serena had to kind of come out of her sister's shadow, work well with her sister as a doubles partner, and then just accomplish everything that she has on her own, nearly, tying Margaret Court's record for most Grand Slam titles. So it's, in the wake of, I think Martina Navratilova or Monica Seles or, Steffi Graf, being like some of the last great, tennis players, women's tennis players, Serena really carved out such a legacy for herself that really separates her from some of those names that I mentioned.
Very well put. Dev, you heard this breaking news. Like Paulie mentioned, we've been blessed from Djokovic and Nadal and Federer to Serena and just some of the classic matchups that we got to see. One of the greatest ever, somebody who personified both being able to be a super athlete and a sex symbol and a entrepreneur, and somebody who produced movies, helped Will Smith win an Oscar portraying her father and King Richard. What did you think when you heard the news that Serena Williams will be evolving, not officially retiring, but evolving, moving on with her life as much as she can from the game of tennis?
It was more a shock of like, oh, she's still doing this. Like, she's been going on for what, like 10, 15, almost 15 years now, if even. I mean, she's been just kind of, what was that?
Probably longer at this point.
20.
Yeah.
20 years. Thank you, Paul. I mean, it's one of those things like just, it's one of those things. If you can play a sport for 20 years, you must be pretty dang good at it. You've seen several male athletes retire within 10 years in every, any sport. And I mean, yeah, I'm kind of with what Paul said. I'm not the biggest women's tennis fan, but I can tell you, I know who Serena Williams is. And if you look at that, like Mount Rushmore of like, the GOATs, you're going to have Jordan, you're going to have Tom Brady. And I think Serena Williams will be the only woman on that Mount Rushmore of, the all-time GOATs in sports history here. And Mercado, you say she doesn't have a rivalry. Do not forget the Oreo milk dunk-off between Serena Williams and Eli Manning of 2006, 7, 08, and 09.
You're right. You're right. When you're right, you're right. But you're right. She was cross. She did hit the mainstream.
Yeah, as I was just going to say, I'm like, if you've been a guest star on The Simpsons, I think that means you've made it in life. So, I mean, I'm happy that Serena Williams is taking some time for herself and not fully retiring. But if Serena Williams were to actually fully retire today, I don't think anyone would criticize her as like, this is the career that, some people can only dream of.
Yeah. No, it's a once in a lifetime, once in a generation, one of the GOATs. And I think we are so lucky. And hopefully we don't take it for granted. I think it's one of the reasons that we cover so many sports that we aren't just baseball fans and football fans and basketball fans. It's why we're interested in two specific sports that had a fallout in our generation. And two people brought it back. In women's tennis, it was Serena Williams, and in professional golf, it was Tiger Woods. And both of these two athletes belong in the Mount Rushmore. And to see now Tiger Woods towards the end of that career, even having that great comeback, and Serena moving on. And now we're telling her story and her sister's story and their father's story as a thing of history. I hope sports fans, I hope fans in general are able to enjoy it, because it's not every day you get to see unicorns play some of the greatest sports on this planet. But we want to know your thoughts on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. Serena Williams, she is evolving from the sport of tennis. Where does she rank? Not just amongst the greatest in tennis, but the greatest in all professional sports. Let us know your thoughts. But we move on from one GOAT to another. We lost Bill Russell, and it has been something that the NBA world has been talking about. The sports world has been talking about, somebody who just impacted a Forrest Gump-esque life. Not just in the sports world, but in the real world, just doing so many amazing things. And now it was announced the first player in the NBA to have his number retired in all stadiums, all jerseys, all cities. Paulie, you brought this news to me. I thought this was wonderful news. It was something that really broke throughout social media. It's been something people were calling about. I know we always talk jokingly here on the Sports Cubicle with Paul Chivari, Devin Tingle, the marvelous one, Dan Marver, myself, Mike Mercado, that Michael Jordan and the Bulls should be celebrated everywhere. There should be a Jordan statue in every city, even if they don't have a basketball team. But in all reality, Bill Russell did deserve this. What are your thoughts seeing that that one of the legends is getting honored this way?
Well, it's neat that they chose Bill Russell, and just to kind of keep the Jordan LeBron argument out of it. And aside from Bill Russell, who else can you think of that did justice to the number 6?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it wasn't LeBron, but
LeBron with Miami, and I mean that. And I think LeBron even too. I think with Team USA wore 6. I think, right?
I believe so. And he's wearing 6 in Miami. Oh, did he wear 6 in Los Angeles, or is he back to 23?
No, he's 23. He's been 23 since he left Miami. But I mean, so I think that kind of, whether the NBA intentionally did that or not, or LeBron did that intentionally or not, I think it's kind of neat that just the number has that much magic to it, that, the 11 championships for Bill Russell and just what he means to the sport in terms of the winning reputation, just at the height of the civil rights movement, being a player coach and the first African-American coach, and to win championships, and, to have the dual Hall of Fame as a player and a coach as well. I think it's just really neat that they're choosing to honor him. They've named the finals MVP trophy after him already. So Bill Russell means a lot to this game. And I think, the legacy of the Boston Celtics and what they were just doing to teams in the 60s. And, it's always the first name that gets mentioned when you talk about the Celtics of the 60s. It's, it's not Bob Cousy, and it's not, the other guys. It's always going to start with Russell, and so I think it means a lot to the sport, and it's interesting. I was wondering if the NBA would ever do that, and I think if you would have said, "Oh, it's a guarantee that it would happen," I would think it would be Jordan or Kareem or maybe Magic Johnson. It's not that I wouldn't have thought of Russell. He probably would have been 4th or 5th on my list, but I just think it's neat that the NBA is choosing to really celebrate this guy for all that he's done, and I think deservedly so, because I think he did a lot of things on and off the court that need to be recognized.
Before I throw it to Big Dev to kind of wrap up these little segments on us being able to really throw flowers at some legends, I think what's interesting for hoop heads and basketball diehards like myself who love the NBA, who live and breathe and die every news that we see, is it's the youngest of the sports, right there with, the NFL. Like a lot of these, like football, 150 years collegially, right? Baseball's been playing since the Civil War. The National Basketball Association, the NBA, something that happened in Springfield, is fairly new compared to these sports, and it's just now that we're really starting to lose not just legends, but top Hall of Famers. I think it's in the last 30 years, we've lost none, and then in the last 10, there's been 17 or 11 Hall of Famers who have died from the NBA. That is a lot. You don't see that in a lot of sports because so many sports are older. And Bill Russell was one of those guys where it didn't matter if it was a kid coming out from Duke in his first year or a 12-year veteran. When he was around at the NBA Finals or the All-Star game, everybody shut up, stood up straight, and went to say hello to Mr. Russell. It wasn't Bill. It was Mr. Russell. Dev, when you saw this, that number 6 will be retired around the NBA, what did you think? The legend Bill Russell getting one last huge accomplishment.
Well, there's only one other person that has their entire number retired through an entire sport, and that's Jackie Robinson in MLB. Number 42 is retired for all he did on the field and off the field. And I think with Bill Russell, all he did on the court and off the court, these are both, everyone knows Jackie Robinson, great ball player and a great man in the civil rights, era. And same with Bill Russell here. And it's like, these are pedestals you don't really put too many people on here. These guys are roughly about the same there. I mean, Bill Russell won more championships, but much different sport. But I got to say, it's like, it goes back to our conversation from one GOAT to the next. It's like, if you were to tell me, I'm going to throw a question back to both of you guys. Do you think in any other sport, is there going to be another player other than Jackie Robinson or Bill Russell that you think their number will be retired through the entire league of any sport? Because I don't think there will be.
Well, I don't think it'll ever happen in football, but maybe. But it's already happened in the NHL.
Mm.
And think about it. Which number in the NHL has already been retired?
Ooh, trivia question. Let us know. We're gonna let it hang. Winner, let us know on Twitter.
There's only one person that would ever get that honor in the NHL.
Well, it's the great one then.
Yeah.
So
what his nickname is literally the great one. Yeah,
it's the great one. So
99 has been, I'm pretty sure that was an official proclamation.
Yeah, they're going to be so mad at us, all the hockey fans. They're just going to be so upset at us on this edition of the Sports.
Hey, at least you landed on it within like seconds of me mentioning it. Wasn't like we edited this together,
No, it edited. We're going to make sure there's a long pause for about 5 minutes to sweet answers. But I have one answer, and it's somebody that I don't think is going to happen, but it might be a little personal too. Roberto Clemente. I mean, somebody who had such huge humanitarian work, passed away doing humanitarian work, and was one of the greatest defensive right fielder of all time to begin with. Arguably the greatest Pittsburgh Pirate if we don't count Barry Bonds, or if we're doing that weird math and we do count Barry Bonds before he went to San Francisco.
Hannes Wagner is the best Pirate of all time. But I'm with you, though, that I think Clemente, because I think of the statement that Latin America has put on baseball. You know, it's an American sport, and obviously Latin America has a huge influence on the United States. You know, even going back to the Civil War, and I think just with what Clemente has meant to the game, and all the players that have come since, I think it's important that he gets recognized, and it's perfect. It's exactly half of Jackie Robinson, 42-21. You know,
I see what you did.
know. So yeah, I mean, and they've been talking about that. At the very least, I'd like to see where they all do a game where everyone wears 21. At the very least, the Pirates or do like a Latin American heritage game with all 21s.
Hey, we're playing in Iowa tonight as of this recording if you're listening to the Sports Cubicle. So why not head back to Puerto Rico? Why not go to the Dominican Republic? That'll be a conversation maybe we save for next episode of the Sports Cubicle of potential places we would like to see baseball go to, because we know the Cubs and Cardinals are going to London. So that'll be something I would like to talk to our audience and to my boys here. But that'll do it for us as we talk about some legends, a GOAT retiring and a GOAT getting a little bit more recognition. It's always a great time when I get to talk to the boys, to the crew, when we get to sip on our coffee, stop doing our work, and get paid on company time as we talk sports. It's the marvelous one, Dan Marver. It's Devin Tingle. It's Paul Chivari. I'm Mike Mercado. We got a lot left here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM. We're on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV.